All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Assassins of Language Learning. This is the third video in the series, so if you haven't seen the others, then check them out, where each week I tackle a topic with another YouTuber or YouTubers who study languages of different motivation killers. So this week I have some special guests with me that I'm really excited to introduce. Actually, I'll have you guys introduce yourselves.
I don't know which one should go first.
We are Matt and Abigail from Polyglot Progress. Yeah, I don't know. What do you want to say? Wow.
Anything you guys want to say.
We make videos over on our channel, Polyglot Progress, where we document our progress learning languages, and we kind of go with like this philosophy of how language learning isn't very linear, how it's okay to kind of not always like we kind of tried to promote an atmosphere of just positivity surrounding progress and knowing that progress isn't always linear. So that's a better way to word it than I just did. And it's not just me, there's also Abigail.
Yeah, yes. Hi.
Yeah, your channel is super inspiring. I know it is to a lot of people, but it is to me as well. And I'm just really happy to have you, and everyone should check you guys out. Also, you guys have your own personal channels as well, right?
Oh boy,
we do.
Mine
yes.
is very inactive, but we do.
Okay, well, I'll have links to your things somewhere in the description box, but this week's topic is about busyness in language learning. Now, we did a video about like almost a year ago now together, where you guys interviewed me about school and languages and juggling the two. So this might overlap with that a little bit, but a lot does happen in a year. And I know, like, I think for all of us, this was like a big year.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So you guys are both in college now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So then when it comes to learning languages, trying to study and juggle that with school, I guess, how do you keep up with learning your languages while you're at school? Like, is there a specific thing you do? Can you give an example of kind of like what you do in school to keep up with your languages?
Yeah, so I guess for me, one of the things that I think is kind of something that a lot of people kind of think of when they're in school is I do sometimes take classes. I am a little bit limited in what classes I can kind of take at school, just because I have like a lot of other kind of requirements for classes that I need to get done that aren't language related, so I don't totally have a ton of space for that. And also just the kind of variety of languages that are offered aren't necessarily all of the languages that I'd like to be learning. Like a lot of languages I can't necessarily take in a class, but I have found that that's a way that I can kind of keep up with and further my French, is the fact that I have a French degree that I'm working on, and I'm taking classes for that. That's kind of like an easy one. But then for the rest of my languages and kind of first semesters where I don't necessarily have a language class and I might be taking like a French culture class or something like that, it's a bit harder, and I'm still definitely trying to find the way to balance all of them, because I think one of my biggest struggles is that I'm busy as it is and I can kind of incorporate language learning into my life, but learning multiple languages becomes kind of the struggle. What I've done recently is I think I've just kind of realized that accountability is kind of like the biggest thing for me. And I think that's why a class in the past helped me to keep up with all of this during busyness, because if you're taking like 6 classes or whatever, you're going to do the work for all of the classes, even if you're busy. You're not going to like only do the work for 5 of them or whatever. So I end up actually sticking with it. So I've kind of just treated my languages in the same way of I've just been trying to hold myself to studying once a day, and it can be as little or as much as I can do that day, but I kind of keep it to at least like the smallest amount of studying I do maybe would be like learning like 10 new vocab words on Memrise or something like that, where it only takes maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, but I'm getting something in, and typically after that I'm kind of like ready to keep going. So I'd say I'm still trying to find the balance of keeping all of my languages, but how I manage to do it is just making sure I do like something And if I'm able to like sit down and do a lot more than I planned for, then that's great. And oftentimes I'm motivated to do that once I get started. But if I'm not, at least I've like kept up with the languages.
And like, if I can just add with the accountability, we were really lucky this year in that the way it worked out to this project we were working on of learning Spanish and Italian, we had meetings with our tutors once a week. And so the meetings with the tutors were lined up, for me at least, kind of right after a class for me. So I would come from a class and then essentially go to another class. But it was a language class now. And I don't have a language major at college. So like, I find for me, it's really difficult to pursue the languages unless I do make a concerted effort for it. And in this sense, it was like we just built Italian and Spanish into our schedule. And even though they weren't college prescribed, it still felt to me like I have an obligation to work on these languages because they're part of my like regime in my week. And yeah, so like that did create a big factor of accountability that I'm really happy with. And I think going forward, I'm going to try something like that again.
Yeah, and that's very interesting that you guys mentioned that, because it kind of leads into my second question, which is, do you guys have a set schedule where, like, if you take classes, then I would say probably, because you do go to class, but even with the languages that you don't study in class, do you have a set schedule of when you study them each day or each week, or is it more of you just study when you find the free time?
I would say, at least for me, I feel like Abigail's probably tried a schedule before, but I know at least, and you've also been in college longer than I have, I haven't found a schedule to work for me, at least with me so far. It's been, because I don't know how much the studying I have to do for the week for college is going to take. So I will typically just structure my week around the work I have to do for college, and then my free time a lot of the time, because I can find language learning to be a bit relaxing, even though it's still, kind of academia and whatnot. I can kind of use it to be an excuse to learn something I want to learn now. So I do kind of float it around my dead time and what I have to do, but I have found at least that it's very difficult to, like, we like to learn multiple languages here, I assume, but it's very difficult when you have like 6 courses or five courses, and then you want to add like 3 languages, and it's just like, you want to do all the studying. And I definitely find that the languages have found a lot more free time in my schedule in summer than they have during the school year. But I like what Abigail said with like just finding whatever free time you can. And like, I know you talked about this on a podcast recently, I think, of just like doing memorize before bed, and like just do like, I need to get a language in every day, even if it's like right before I go to sleep. And I like that too, because I mean, I think something is better than nothing, because like, just college kids are so busy.
Yeah, for me personally, I don't currently have a specific schedule, but I'm working on building one, just because I feel like for me the problem is that I oftentimes can end up doing more of one language than another, kind of unintentionally. So something that I've been doing this year is kind of tracking what languages I study each day, which not only like holds me accountable, like I have to put in what language I studied. So if I don't study anything, then I'm gonna have like a hole in the thing and I'm gonna see it. But also I can kind of tell what I've been doing more of. Like I've found that recently, kind of without even trying, it ended up being that like the whole month of June, I studied only German, really. And it was totally unintentional. It just happened to be that every time I kind of like studied a language at the end of the day, I was like super busy in June, really just only had time to study a little bit of vocab before I went to bed. And it just kind of always ended up being German for some reason. So that's kind of something I'm now taking into account and trying to make sure that I kind of balance in the other languages that I want to study or even just maintain, because I feel like that can be something that really falls behind when I'm busy, is I just forget to use the languages that I've already studied in the past. So I'm working on kind of trying to make myself a specific schedule, but at the same time, I think whatever schedule I have that works for me is still going to be very flexible, because much like Matt, like I have different amounts of work each week.
Yeah.
Maybe I have a job some weeks and maybe I don't have the same hours another week. Like just my life is always kind of changing. And so I think having a set thing like these hours every single day I do this is just like a little too structured for me. I'm also not that structured of a person in general.
You're interesting though, because you set so many goals. So you seem very structured, but you kind of like let yourself do them whenever you want.
Yeah, I think what I do is I structure myself kind of based on like goals or based on like tasks, which I guess is kind of like the same thing as goals, but like I structure myself more on like what I want to get done as opposed to like how like the set hours in a day, just because I kind of then like I think it's partially because I'm like a pretty intrinsically motivated person that I can kind of see like this is what I need to get done, and then throughout the day like I want to get that done, but I kind of let myself just kind of like feel when in the day is best to get kind of each thing done. And that might just be like I'm lucky in that respect that I'm okay like seeing my goals and like wanting to get those done, which definitely helps. But I feel like that's where my structure comes in as opposed to like set hours for things.
Nice.
Yeah, and I remember seeing a video that you had put out. It was a while back. It was about the bullet journal, so I was curious about that and if that came into play with kind of how you study at college or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely. So I started bullet journaling my senior year of high school, I think. So this will be my fourth year doing it, because I'm going to be a junior in college. So I started senior year, I guess, because Matt had actually started one, and I was like, "That's cool. I want to make my own planner." You did actually. You started before me, and you also were on Study Blur before me, and you showed me, and I was like, "This is cool. I want to try this." And so I started it just for senior year, and I ended up finding that it really worked for me. Something that was always a problem for me throughout high school is that I felt like there wasn't enough space in my planner because I wanted to be able to write things in that were both kind of like school related and not school related. If I had like even like college essays, or if I had like a play rehearsal or something, I wanted to be able to keep track of that, and I wasn't really able to. And so when I started bullet journaling, I feel like I was able to kind of take so much more on because I was given the space to keep a to-do list. And I feel like that's where I really learned that keeping like a to-do list in that manner really helped me, because I was able to accomplish so many more of my sort of like outside of school goals along with my schoolwork. And then in college, I think that's really kind of what's allowed me to do so much work. I have kind of like almost like like what I have for each week is almost sort of like what you'd find in a weekly planner, just structured a little bit more towards what I feel like works for me and what helps me stay on top of things. And then I also actually have like a running kind of like what's due this week for each week of the semester. So that way I can really make sure I stay on top of my school things. And I think that's kind of how I balance it too, in that I can see in advance like what each week's work is like. So I'm never like caught off guard by like school things. I can kind of stay on top of things or in advance, and then that gives me the time to kind of do other language projects.
Also with that, we actually went, I don't think it really worked for us, but we did like make a curriculum for us with our Spanish and Italian project, and like scheduled it in our weeks. Although we were just so busy that it kind of fell through, I think.
Yeah.
But it was an effort, you know.
Yeah, but I'd say just like with the bullet journal, I'd say even if it's not that, I think like the number one way to like do languages while you're busy is just to have some sort of organization system for yourself, whether it's like a normal planner or just like in your phone. Like what I do before I bullet journal is like each night when I'm going to bed, I just like make myself a little to-do list for the next day in my phone notes. Just because I feel like that actually makes it so I'm like a little bit more calm. I can go to sleep because I'm like, this is what I'm doing tomorrow. It's on here. I'm not going to forget anything. And it's there. And then in the morning, I can like actually look at my planner and be like, what do I actually want to get done today?
Yeah, that's great that you guys do that. And you're right. It's kind of about organization. It doesn't have to be a specific method, because something different would work for different people, you know? And then I wanted to ask you guys, because you both work, from what I understand, how does it change? Because right now you're on summer break, right? All right. So then with kind of your work schedules, how does that change? Because maybe not everybody here is necessarily in school, but they might have a job of some sort. And like we may not be working full-time jobs or anything right now, but how does busyness come into play with language learning in terms of work instead of school?
I feel like I'm a less good one to talk about that just because I live in a really small town. And so it's kind of impossible for me to get like a normal like summer job. So I end up doing like weird tasks. Like I'm currently like a babysitter for kids. So I basically drive them to and from camp and things. And
You're an
I
Uber
teach
driver.
English online. And then usually I'll do other things like I'll like weed people's gardens and stuff. Like I do very oddball tasks. So I'm a little bit less good to talk to about that one.
And I also sort of feel not up to par because my recent job was just being a cashier at a supermarket. And although we were sort of lucky, you did an internship recently where you got to
Mhm.
use your language quite a bit, and I think it was a perfect intersection of your like career interests, which like you can talk about that if you'd like. But mine was totally unintentional, where I didn't think that I lived in a very like multilingual area at all. Um, and I was pleasantly surprised being a cashier and then having customers speaking all different languages at different points. It was mainly English, like I would say 79% English. But then, I would get a very nice majority speaking Spanish, but I would be too nervous to speak back to them. Um, but I got like a decent amount of customers in Italian and German and French even, and I was not expecting that at all when I signed on for this job. I was just expecting a summer job, and I thought it to be different, but it actually combined. Like I was able to use some of my skills that I didn't even need here to help me and make it more enjoyable for me. So like I think everybody has that opportunity as a language interested person going into a field to bring their skills to it. But also, outside of that job, I was not a very happy person. It was a lot of hours on me, and like I was genuinely like just so tired and did not have much more energy for anything. It did add a lot of structure to my day though, and I did start waking up early to do other things. So in terms of like whether I needed to exercise or like actually study languages, so I would say that there is room there to kind of use the structure that you're provided and then build around it. So I wish I had enough willpower then to do that, but sadly I did not. But yeah.
Okay, well, that kind of leads into because you just mentioned about the fact that sometimes you would be miserable when you'd come back and you
Yeah,
just didn't have the energy for anything else. So, that
absolutely.
being said, this kind of answers that question, but I'd also like to know what Abigail has to say. Do you guys ever feel too exhausted when you come back from school after doing all that homework, any activities that you do at school or work? And then, like, you come back. Do you ever feel too exhausted to study your language, or are you like on top of it? And if you do struggle, how do you try to
I wish.
overcome that?
Yeah, I literally the last kind of like month and a half, I was at this internship like Matt was saying, and it basically was as soon as I woke up to as soon as I went to sleep because I like basically like I had a living space through this internship, and so I was every hour that I was awake I was basically doing things for this internship. I didn't have like time off or anything, and it
It's
basically
intense.
it was a lot of work for me, and it was a lot of work for me while I spoke only French all day. Which I feel like although I can kind of like do comfortably, I think it does just like take more of a toll on me when I'm switching back and forth between English and French all day, even if I am doing it kind of seamlessly. I think I'm just like a little bit more tired by the end of it because it takes a little bit more brain power than just speaking one language all day, and especially more than just speaking English all day. um so I definitely, that was kind of where I was at, where I would come back to go to bed and it would be like 12 or 1 a.m. And I would be exhausted and I'd want to just like go to bed. And so I'd say I definitely wasn't on top of it. I wasn't like, well, it's time to study for 45 minutes or whatever. Um, but it was just kind of like holding myself to doing like a little bit each day. And if I hadn't found time to do language study throughout the day at all. Like I would make sure that I did like just a little bit, and usually I could kind of like keep pushing myself through it just like a little bit more. Like I'd do like maybe like one round of memorize or whatever, and then I'd be like, wait, I learned some really cool words. Like this sounds like this other word that I know in a different language. And I'd kind of like get more on a roll, and I'd want to maybe like move out to other kind of like apps or whatever. I usually was just using apps because I couldn't really bring books with me, but it did kind of like push me to do a little bit more. And I also really liked the feeling of like kind of adding more languages on. So by the end, I was kind of doing like, I would speak French throughout the day. I'd do a little bit of German, and then I'd do a little bit of Spanish and maybe a little bit of Italian as well at night. And it just felt really nice to get to use all of these things and like really get to kind of where I'm striving to be, and like being able to use all of the languages that I study. So I think for me, it was just really like getting myself to start, and also just like using any time I did have, like if I was on the subway or something, like doing a little bit of Memrise or another app that I can kind of access without Wi-Fi. Or I don't know, if I just had any other kind of like waiting time, I'd try to do like a little bit of something.
Yeah.
Okay. And Matt, because I know you said you would get home and then you'd be like super miserable and exhausted. So did you end up studying at all, or were you just like, nah, I'm done?
I think what's really interesting that happened, and I'm only now starting to like break myself out of it, is when I think when we language learners get really tired, something that's an easy fallback is having a passive activity to kind of trick ourselves into thinking like we're studying. And I had a long phase, and I'm only now like realizing how much of a problem it is, where most of my studying was passive. It was just listening, or like listening and reading, but mainly listening and not really like breaking apart the text, and kind of just all of this stuff just going in and nothing coming out. And it's a big problem, because you can learn passively. Like there's a reason we have passive and active learning, both do something, but when it's all passive for so long, you don't really improve, and you can even fall back a little, I think, in terms of what your output is. And so I mean, it's tough. I only recently am starting to realize that like this was a big problem in like specifically my German, because I'm starting to realize how much trouble I have with taking a noun and like unconsciously declining it in other cases. Like I'm realizing how much I have to focus to do that now, and I'm like, this is not a problem I had when I was in high school using German every day. Like, it's just because now I'm just listening to it, and like, you know, so I'm kind of having a point where I need to like step back into my learning and kind of make an effort to write every now and again, and just make my learning active more. And so whether that's speaking or writing, just getting that in, getting it out of me instead of just, you know, taking it in. I do think both are necessary, but when you're lazy and tired, it's very easy to be more passive, I think. And this is something I think we all do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. It's so easy to fall into the trap of just the passive listening. Like that was something that I did often. I actually just completed my 1-year grad school program, which was in interpreting and translation.
Whoa, dude, congratulations. Whoa.
Thank you. And since it was 1 year long, it was just really condensed. Like it was a lot of credits to take at once. There was an internship component. And like Abigail, I was using my language. I was using Spanish specifically. It was a Spanish and English translation program that I was in. And so I was using the language, but I was just so drained by the end of it that sometimes I would see a sign in English, but then read it with Spanish pronunciation. So it goes to show like how much that can get in your head at the end of the day.
The same thing happened to me, where it would just be like I had my friend also speaks French, who is also from New York, and so we'd end up like we'd be walking together and we'd be speaking English, and we'd just be like, this is too much, and we'd just switch back to French to talk to each other, or we'd just like let French words come out, and we were like, glad you understand, because I don't have the energy. I really can't do English right now.
I need to ask you guys, because I feel like if you both had this interpreting like experience, Abigail, you said like when you got back at the end of the day, you would still try to do languages, but for both of you, did it kind of become like a, well, my job had to do with languages. I already did Spanish, I already did French today, like did it being like I used it today. Does that mean internally are you like, well, did the language, now I don't need to do anything? Or like would you still try to do something else?
Yeah, so I let myself it for the first, I think it was like 4 or 5 days. Basically, I only, because when I went into it, I hadn't spoken French for like a good like 6 months or something, which is probably not what you should do right before going to like interpret French all day. But it just happened that I really didn't have time to do that because I was focused on my Spanish and Italian, and that was kind of my priority. And then it came around and I was like, ooh, yikes. But it was fine. So sort of as I like caught back up in French, I counted it, but I also tried to do some other French at the same time. Like I tried to like learn some vocab. Like if I heard a word that I didn't know, I'd make sure I wrote it down and I learned it. I also was trying to do like close master and that sort of things for French because I had it as goals anyway. So just to like kind of like keep track of like the things I was learning and really solidify that in my head. But after that, I actually made myself study like different languages. I didn't count it anymore. I just was like, I'm just living my life in French, but I still have to study a different language. And so I basically did German every day.
Nice.
Yeah, I had a problem of, like you were saying, with the passive learning, kind of getting sucked into that because on one hand, some of my language use was active. With the Spanish, I kind of counted it, but at the same time, when I wasn't in the couple of classes that I had that spoke Spanish or in my internship, I was using English all the time, which was a big difference from when I was back in undergrad. All my classes were in Spanish, French, or Portuguese, so I had to use it all the time.
That's
like
so cool.
all
I'm
the
so
time.
jealous.
It's got its ups and downs, but so
I bet.
I would use it all the time over there, and I felt like I could switch back and forth pretty well. But then here, well, in that program that I was just in, I felt like I was having more trouble. And it felt like it counted in my head because I'm like, yeah, I used some Spanish. I said like 5 words in class. That counts, right? But no, it really doesn't because I wasn't using it conversationally. I was trying to use it to explain difficult concepts that I really didn't understand in English as well. So in a way, I actually felt like I got worse for a little while. Now, in the internship, that was helpful because that was kind of real life situations. It was all medical Spanish, but it was still conversational.
Gotcha.
But then when I would be outside of class, I tried to join groups that were like a French speaking club and then this like Spanish conversation hour every week. And that was helpful. But with the French group, the problem was that my internship was during their conversation hour. So I just couldn't go to it. I attended 2 of those and I tried. I really did try, but it just didn't work out, unfortunately. However, I did have some active use of French and Portuguese because some of my classmates also were language learners that learned languages other than Spanish, so I was able to practice with them, and that was nice, but it wasn't like frequent that I did that. So I would say that I really suffered this year from being busy and just not being on top of studying, because after, I don't know if you feel this way, Abigail, but like after using a language all day long, the last thing you want to do is like go study some more, or at least that's how I felt after taking all of my classes.
Like
transitioning, I think, from like letting myself kind of like count French to like making myself do something else on top, I think was a little bit difficult because, I mean, even though I wasn't like passively using French, like I was either like full on interpreting or I was just like speaking French, like I was like running a film set in French, but like that's actively using it in theory. But I feel like in a sense, I wanted to see myself, I guess, like making progress as well. And I feel like for me, like a lot of that was like I was more so maintaining my French level, or I guess I was learning like some new words, but I really wanted to kind of like focus on other languages too, which is why I made myself study other ones. But going from like just like doing something in in 2 languages all day to then being like, okay, great, you did English and French all day, now like add another one. Like it was definitely the first few days were like pretty exhausting, especially because I was already so tired, and I just feel like it takes up so much more of your brain to be speaking another language and that you're not used to in general, but especially to be switching back and forth. I feel like that just takes so much more out of you as well.
Can I have two things I want to add?
Go
Sure.
for it.
I think, first of all, I think the feeling you guys are talking about with the like just the like absolute exhaustion in your brain that you could like, it's almost palpable. I don't know the exact quote, but I remember Richard Simcott said something like, if you're not feeling that feeling when you're speaking a language, you're not doing it right. So that means we're doing good. We're like,
That's encouraging.
right? But because I remember that feeling at least when I like got off the plane my first time in Germany, and then like everything from then on is like, for the most part, I was on exchange programs, but like for the most part is in that language. And just like that first sleep that I had after like being bombarded with all that, it's just so intense. Like I don't know how to describe that. And then I wanted to ask Abigail again. I feel like I'm half interviewing. I'm sorry, Angela. I wanted to ask you had a system, and I think you started it during the internship, of adding a language a day to your regime type thing.
It was every few days, and it fell apart when I got back from the internship.
But still, I think that was like really good.
In theory, my plan to like build myself a schedule almost was that I was kind of like adding another language every few days. So it started out like I only spoke French, and then it was I'm speaking French and English, and I'll also study German. And then after I felt comfortable, like it felt like a good part of my routine, I was then trying to also study like Spanish on top of that. And then I was going to add Italian, and then eventually, if I had time, Bulgarian. And it just kind of, I got back, and even though I have more time at home, I feel like when I go from one schedule to another schedule, it just kind of like throws me off in terms of that. Like I had built my ability to kind of like do French, German, and Spanish into like the kind of like routine I had. And so just going to like different hours of like being awake and functioning and doing work and things just kind of like threw me off a little bit. But I do think that like practice, I guess, in general was working in a sense. So I would like to try it again and see if it would work for me now in the summer. But I guess then I'll go back to school and I'll have to start over again.
Yeah, that's the thing about school, is that it kind of changes every year, each semester, even with your schedule, the classes you're taking, how much work you're going to get, that you can't really have like a set language learning schedule because it's constantly changing.
Yeah, that's definitely the problem I found. And even when I have like my course schedule, I just find that I have so many things that kind of get added on top of it. Like we were taking like Spanish and Italian lessons every week, and we had to cancel so many of them.
Yeah.
Especially we fell like 4 weeks behind in our Spanish lessons to like our Italian lessons at one point, because it just happened to be that I had like a meeting with a professor, or like a mandatory like study thing, or like some just random things like that sick, kind of, I think, appear throughout the semester. That you don't really know about, and then your professor's like, you need to come to this like event for class, like I'd like you all to come to this. For me, it's oftentimes like film screenings, or like we're having like a guest come in, and I want the class to come see the speaker, so you all have to come. Or like we had snow days, and my professor like rescheduled our classes to be on different days, and so it just like threw everything off. So I think even once you have like a set schedule in college, it's never actually set. Like,
yeah, it's so tough. Like you have the times that you're gonna be in class, but then every other time outside of class, it's like it's just gonna fluctuate.
Yeah, especially if you're such a planner. And it's crazy, because there was always this joke, but it was like a half joke, because if anyone wanted to do something together, like hang out, I'm like, please ask me like a few weeks in advance.
Give me
just
3 weeks, I'll pencil you in.
Exactly. Like I'd have written down like what I wanted to do, when all these events I had to go to, guest speakers, movies that we had to go watch and stuff. So yeah, it's just crazy. Like your schedule never really is set. It kind of just has a way of filling itself up.
Yeah, definitely. I know there were so many times, even just like with this call, like there were so many times where we were like, we still need to collab with Angela. And it's like, oh, we might have free time like in a few weeks. And then it would be like, oh, so here's like this and this and this and this. And we're like, okay.
Yeah, and I think the more people involved, the harder it is because there's 3 of us right now. So then it's like 3 different people's schedules, and that could be very difficult. But like I said, I'm glad that you guys were able to find time to do this.
Me too.
Yeah, so are we.
And then I wanted to know, because you put out a video that was called How I Set Goals and Why You Should Too. And so I kind of wanted to ask about the whole goal setting thing. We kind of touched upon that a little bit with the idea of to-do lists or like studying 10 words on Memrise a day or something like that. But do you find that setting goals helps you with time management? And kind of like, how do you set goals when it comes to college and your ever-changing schedules and everything?
I literally, Abigail's like my goal setting counselor. Like, she's who I go to when I'm like feeling so stressed. I'm like, Abigail, I just don't think I'm ever gonna accomplish the things I want to. And she's like, we're gonna set some goals, Matt. Like, breathe. We're gonna set some goals. What do you want to do? What's like the big picture? I know I'm answering for you now, and I shouldn't do that, but
no, go for it. This means my goal counseling is working.
It is.
You know the system.
So like, because I always like wouldn't set goals. I'm like, I just want to do it. Like, why should I set goals? But then like, you're like, Matt, I think you need some goals. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm not getting anything done. I'm just sitting here doing nothing.
Yeah, I am a goal counselor. He'll be like, I'm feeling so just like sad and I like can't get anything done. I'm like, all right, goals.
Last night. I was like feeling so down. I'm like, I've had ancient Greek and German and like things I want to do for Polyglot Progress like in my bullet journal for the past 2 days. And every day I've just been pushing them off to the next day. And I go, Abigail, how do I get these things done? They've just been here and I'm not doing them. And she's like, what's the big picture? She's like, what do you want like next week? And I'm like, you're so right.
Oh,
I've been blind for so long.
What it's about, like making it into bite-sized pieces so that you could handle it instead of biting off more than you can chew. Because this isn't language related per se, but when it came to scheduling, like kind of figuring out when to do my assignments and everything, I would kind of have like what was due for the week or for the next class. And then I'd break it down individually by day. And I'm like, okay, so on Monday, I'm going to do this assignment. And then on Tuesday, I'll do this assignment. And then they're both due for Wednesday, but I didn't try to do them all in one day. So I know that could be helpful. And I think it's also helpful. You guys mentioned accountability, just the idea of having somebody else to work with and that has a strength in organization to be able to help you. And you guys can help each other with the strengths that you have. So I think that that's really great that you guys do that.
Yeah, I think with with language learning too, I think like setting goals is like 100% the same as what you were saying with assignments. Like I think it's just kind of like knowing what like your final, I guess, endpoint is, and then like kind of taking it from there, because it just seems so much more manageable, but also kind of keeps you on track. And I think that's also how I can like prioritize languages along with my school assignments, is if I have to do like 1 page of this 20-page paper, and I also need to do 3 pages of this textbook that I'm hoping to finish by the end of the semester for like German or whatever. It makes it so that they're both kind of goals that I can work on alongside each other as well. And it's never like, oh, well, I can't study languages at all because I have to write all 20 pages of this 20-page paper. And it's also not like, oh, I need to write 1 page of this assignment, but also like, man, how am I ever going to like fit language learning into this? There's like so much that I don't know about the German language. Instead, it's like, just do it for like a certain amount of time or just like a little bit in the book and things. And so I guess, yeah, I feel like I worded things better in my video about goal setting. So I guess maybe it would be better to direct people there. But in general, I'd say just like make bigger goals and then break it down from there in like chunks. So I have like big goal, and then from there I do year goal, semester goals, because I'm in school. That one doesn't really work as well if you're not in school. But for me, like semester goals mean a little bit more to me even than like my year goals, because the calendar year really doesn't mean much when you're in school, I feel like. And then I do like monthly, but like monthly doesn't really hold a lot of weight for me personally. Those are the goals that I end up forgetting I made. And then I just do like weekly and then just kind of like daily goals, but that's just like my to-do list. Like it's just small things. Like I'd like to study X amount of German or whatever. And then the only other thing I'd say is like be really specific in your goals, because I think it's easy to be like, learn the German language. But like, and I think that can be kind of like a big goal, is like learn like enough German to do whatever, or like feel like you know the German language or whatever. But I think in like specific things, like that's part of how to like let yourself do it while you're busy too, is instead of like putting in your daily to-do list like, oh, learn German, as well as doing all of these other things that I have to do. Like it's just like a very specific thing. Like for me this summer, I know, for example, I want to get to like a certain number of words on a memorized course that I'm doing. And so that means that each day I'm like, oh, if I do like a little bit of German memorize, I'm working towards that goal because I want to boost my vocabulary in German. So it like I know what I'm working towards, and so it also helps motivate me to fit it into my schedule.
I was gonna say, the name of your channel is Polyglot Progress, and you said about the whole idea of like progression in language learning and everything. Well, like when you set goals, it helps you to track your progress and therefore motivate you, because you could see what you have accomplished instead of when you have just learned German there, which is funny that you say that, because I'm a person who loves lists. Like I have lists all the time for like everything. And one summer I had like a summer goals list, and one of the things on there was learn Spanish. And somebody, I'm not going to mention like names or anything, but someone looked at it and they're like, how's that going for you? And they were completely serious. And I was just like, oh, I don't know. But then so that summer, needless to say, I didn't really learn Spanish. But then eventually when I did kind of come up with a system, kind of break it up into goals of like what I wanted to accomplish and everything, then eventually I was able to learn Spanish to a level that I was hoping to get to.
I think it also just like it helps with like morale and like learning stuff like that too. I feel like just because I know like when I was a kid I tried to learn so many languages, and I feel like I kind of carried with me this idea that like learning languages was like so hard, and I should have done it when I was like an infant, because like I'm too old now. And I was like 8 years old, and I was like, I'm too old to learn a language now. Like I remember thinking that because I tried to teach myself Italian, and it was because I was like, my goal is to learn Italian like over the summer or whatever. And then like I couldn't speak that much Italian by the end of the summer. But I was also like an 8-year-old who was trying to self-teach myself and had no idea what she was doing. But I feel like it was that thing of then I was like, I don't know any Italian. Like I should have been a child, to like a baby, to learn this language. Now I can't, I'm too old. And I think once I like got older, even as I like tried to learn languages, the same thing kind of happened where I was like, man, I haven't learned this language. Like I can't learn languages. I guess it's too hard. I'm too old or whatever. And I think that's something a lot of people think. And so for me, like being able to be like, oh, my goal is to finish this textbook or to finish this course or be able to speak for this many like minutes. Like for the Add One challenge, it was like speak for 15 minutes. Or like I want to be able to, I don't know, watch a film and understand like a good portion of it or something. I feel like goals like that end up making me feel like a little bit better, because then I reach those goals and I can see that I've progressed from where I came from. And so it's given me a better picture of I am making progress, and I don't speak whatever language like a native speaker, but I have made a lot of progress, and that's all that really matters.
I'm sorry, but I love the idea of 8-year-old Abigail just like sitting with an Italian textbook, like, this isn't happening.
Muzzy.
It's too late. So I was sitting in front of a TV with Muzzy on, just going, it's not happening. I can't do this.
I know. I just also love the concept of 8-year-old me being like,
I'm too old
to learn a language. I think about that all the time. I'm like, what? Like
I've never heard this story. That's so great.
No, I was literally 8, and I decided to teach myself Italian, and decided I was too old to learn a language. I was really mad at my parents too, because I was like, you should have taught me a second language. Yeah, exactly. Neither of my parents like speaks another language, but I was like mad that they didn't, because I was like, I could have been bilingual. You did this to me.
Oh my gosh.
So it worked out in the end. So if you're an 8-year-old watching this mad at your parents, it's okay, hang in there.
Forgive them.
Yeah, forgive
They're
them.
doing their best.
And
I wanted to ask,
especially if they know
Oh,
a
yeah.
second language. Because that's what happened to me. Like,
Yeah.
my mom speaks Spanish, and I was not taught as a kid. So then I was like, oh no. And then my sister did fall into the trap of like, it would have been easier if I were a kid. Like, why didn't you do this? It's all your fault. But you're older. There's nothing you could do at this point. So now it's up to you to try to go learn it.
Yeah, there's no point in like falling back on that belief and then not doing anything about it just in spite of the like or because of it. Like, because then you're just why like diagnose that as the problem and then not doing anything anyway. That's like, all right, that's just I'm now a symptom of this. But
8 years old, past our prime, it's all downhill.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine?
I believe 8 years old is still before the cutoff that they say like you can't even get a native accent to. Like even that
It's
cutoff
like
of like
12 or 13,
yeah, I think
right?
that's like 11 or 12 or something. So I really wasn't too old.
Wow.
I
Oh
could
my
have sounded
gosh.
like a native Italian speaker.
I wanted to ask you guys if you could, because you mentioned before, like just putting in your thing like do German, like that doesn't do anything for you. You know, that's not specific enough. That's not. I wanted to ask in terms of like I tried this thing before and it's never really worked for me in terms of like I would take a textbook and I would break it down in terms of chapters or like units. And I would kind of make that like a little checklist for me so I could see I could visually not only see me going through the book, but I would see myself checking it off as I go. And I thought this was great. I'm like, I've revolutionized language learning. I'm like making it a game now. I can see myself progressing and like all this stuff. And it's never worked for me though. And like, I think that's probably a problem of accountability, but also just that's not specific enough. But I don't know how you get more specific. Like, do you recommend, like in terms of what you guys have found, do you think it's better to like have a set amount of time that I'm going to be studying in this textbook, or is it a better thing to have like these are the pages I want to get done? Do you know what's worked better for you guys? Because I put for myself like do 30 minutes of this, and then like it scares me that I've set 30 minutes for myself and I don't do it because I'm like those are 30 minutes I could do other things. But like I sat down today and did Greek for like an hour, and it was totally fine, and I only got through like a page or two because I was like focused on doing them really well. But like, so like, would I sacrifice quality if I'm trying to get through these pages before I'm done? I don't know. I'm scared of everything.
I mean, I have a few things to unpack in what you just said.
Please do.
Number one, oh wait, why did I just lose my train of thought? Oh, you were like, that's 30 minutes I could be doing other things. I think the number one thing is just priorities.
Well,
Like,
yeah, I totally agree.
Busyness, like, there's that thing that's like, oh, like, you can, like, you'll make time or whatever, which I only partially agree with, to be completely honest, because I think sometimes, like, you are actually, like, too busy to make times for certain things. And also that, because sometimes it's, you have priorities that aren't flexible. Like, for me, like, I don't have I can't like drop out of school and like have that time to learn languages. Like that's a priority that's like, it's kind of like locked into place. I can't be like, oh yeah, that's not top of my priorities anymore.
You're not serious enough as a language learner is what you're saying. You're not going to drop out of school to pursue it full time. Not a real polyglot. Yeah.
So yeah, so that's one of those things where it's like I need to show up for classes. I'm paying the tuition. I'm not going to not go to my classes so I can study German for that like few hours or whatever. So I think there is like some bit of lock, but within that, like you technically like, yeah, in that 30 minutes you could go play a video game or something, or you could study a language. Like
but then afterwards I feel awful because I'm like, I played a video game and I didn't study a language.
See, like, so that it's just about priorities. And I think sometimes like you do need the 30 minutes to, like, I think it's also really unhealthy to like pack yourself in. Like, I think that's one thing with busyness. And I think that's partially why like Matt and I will disappear for like the whole school semester from Polyglot Progress. And it's not because it's not a priority, but sometimes it's like, I have 30 minutes, I could be editing this video, or I have 30 minutes where I could breathe. Like, yeah, like I need to like take a nap before my next class, or like I really would like to just like sit with my friends for a little longer after we eat lunch or something, because like I'm feeling super stressed and I just like need this time for myself. And I think like a priority should also be like taking care of yourself. And if you need to take that 30 minutes longer to like take some deep breaths or like drink a glass of water or whatever, like take that 30 minutes to do that instead. But yeah, I think
that's some good downtime. You could do some passive listening activities.
I think the thing with whether to go by time or by like amount, I think depends on the day, I guess. I mean, for me, like I really just try to keep it to like what I've been doing recently is if I haven't studied at all that day, I try to do my like limit is like I have different limits based on the apps, but I have like a minimum amount that I want myself to do. And it usually ends up being I'd say around like 10 minutes is like my minimum. But usually I end up going beyond that, even on days where I'm like, if it had been in my to-do list, like do 20 minutes, I probably would have been like, I can't do that today. I'm too busy, too tired, whatever. But then once I'm like laying in bed, like doing Memorize or Duolingo or whatever it is I'm doing that day, I like get past my 10 minutes and I'm like, I could keep going for like one more round of whatever this is. And then it ends up being like that 20 minutes or even longer or whatever. So I'd say like,
what's that called? It's like
the 5-minute rule or something.
Yeah,
2-minute
and then
rule
like if you can do it for 5 minutes, you can do it for longer.
Yeah. So I'd say like something like that. So I'd say whatever it is that makes it look more manageable for you, almost, because I feel like it ends up being about the same. I'd say the book thing I've also tried in the past and it didn't work for me either. And I think why it doesn't work is because the pages in a textbook are going to take different amounts because they have like different information, and like one page might be a reading exercise that ends up taking you 30 minutes, while another page could just be like a vocab list that you could read through in like 10 minutes and get right what you need down and keep going. So I've also moved away from that. I'd say the only way to do that is if you sit down and look at it in advance and kind of know how long it would take you to get through each exercise, and then be able to say like, oh, I want to get through 4 pages in this study session or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because, well, depending on the lesson, like it may increase in difficulty, or some textbooks aren't very organized and then they just kind of have like lessons all over the place. So depending on the lesson and the difficulty of that lesson, it might take more or less time to complete it than one of the other lessons. And one of the things I wanted to say is that like I'm terrible for this question because the only time I use textbooks is for school. So a lot of the learning I do is through apps or online exercises or online lessons, actually. Like for Korean, the majority of my Korean learning has been through Talk to Me in Korean, which they have their own curriculum and lessons. So when it came to that, I would try to do a lesson a day. And then when I was reviewing it, I would try to do more than one just to review it. But usually, I guess that would be the equivalent to like pages in a textbook. So I would try to do a lesson a day when it came to that. But then when it came to something like Duolingo or another app or like Rosetta Stone, what I did for that was I would kind of combine it with another activity, such as riding the exercise bike or something like the stationary bike.
That's fantastic.
And I would do it for like half an hour and just be doing my lesson while working out at the same time. But at that point, I would time it.
That's actually one of my like I might make a video on that at some point soon. That's like my favorite tip, honestly, for staying on top of like being busy, is to like work out
Combine
and
it with
do
something
languages
else
at the same time. Yeah, just combining it in general. Like if you can, I for some reason don't have the brain power to do both of these activities at once, but if you can brush your teeth and learn a language at the same time, that's like a great way to go.
Oh my gosh!
But for some reason, I just like I've tried to do like flashcards while brushing my teeth, and I just my brain, that's like the one thing where
that's like rubbing, that's like patting your head and rubbing your stomach.
Yeah, I can work out and do flashcards at the same time, but if I'm like trying to study while brushing my teeth, for some reason that just like my brain can't handle that one. But that is like, I guess, a good example of like doing it. And that also means that you'll do it every day, assuming you brush your teeth every day. You like end up then always getting that
enforces positive habits.
Yeah, or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you study a language every day but need to remember to brush your teeth. Maybe that's the way to go.
It's so funny that you mentioned that example, but I don't want to cut you off, so go ahead.
No, that's about it. I just find that it's really helpful to like learn things at the same time, but especially for exercising. Like, I mean, obviously it can be really hard for me to also exercise while I'm super busy, so that sometimes I don't always rely on that as my language study, since it's hard for me to remember to like go to the gym or make time to go to the gym.
Mhm.
But when I can, I really love doing languages while exercising, because I feel like it like distracts me from the exercising. And then it also like there has been like studies that like working out will like help the like language like stick in your brain a little bit better. And it just like I feel like it's a nice chunk of time too, because there's nothing else you can really do for that 30 minutes. So you can't really be like, oh, but I could doing this other thing for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Because chances are you're not going to be like, I wish I was listening to music for that 30 minutes. Like you're gonna, you'll feel better, I think, having done like a language in that time while also going to the gym. And then you can just feel like unstoppable because you went to the gym and studied a language in one day.
You're a beast. You're a monster. That's fantastic.
And probably brush your teeth as well.
Hopefully.
It's so funny you mentioned the brushing teeth thing though, and oh my gosh, like you're never gonna want to talk to me again. But like so I've always heard that it was recommended to brush your teeth for 2 minutes, and I just tend to be like on the very careful side of things. So I would try to do it for 2 minutes, and I think you could see where this is going. So I would count to 60 in 2 different languages while I was brushing my teeth.
2 different languages? Oh, you would count like to a minute and then do a different language?
Yeah.
See, that's
really
Or
cool.
sometimes I would do it in
I like
tens
that.
and like
maybe I'll start doing that, because that's a way I can. My brain can probably handle that one for language learning, as opposed to like trying to actually study.
Unless you forget the numbers and then you're just brushing your teeth forever until you remember.
I feel like I can think while brushing my teeth, though. I think it's when I'm like looking at something while brushing my teeth, for some reason that like really throws me off, and I'm not sure what like evolutionary thing in my brain that is, that I can't brush my teeth and like look at other things. But
yeah, so it's funny that you mentioned that, because like my roommates would always make fun of me for that and everything. But like,
you do it out loud?
It works.
You do it out loud?
No, I just told them that I would do it though. No, I did not do it out loud. No
I
way.
feel like that would be a lot of trouble while brushing your teeth, trying to count out loud.
It'd be funny though. I'd be entertained.
And the thing is,
I struggle with numbers a lot. So like that's a good way to reinforce it.
Yeah. Exactly. Like it gets you to use them. And you could kind of vary it up. Like you could count to 10 and then like in one language, then switch and do 20 to 30 and so on. Or wait, I just skipped a whole set of numbers, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I may actually steal that one.
That sounds really good. I definitely want to try that too. And now I'll remember to brush my teeth because I want to count.
Yes, and good hygiene.
Look at us. We're promoting exercise. Well, great dental hygiene. Oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah, well-being in every aspect. And then another thing I wanted to say about combining activities is another one I would do. Now, this is more on the passive side. Like with the exercising, it was active in the sense of like I was doing a Duolingo lesson. Mm-hmm. But on the passive side of things, when I was getting ready in the morning, like as I would change my clothes, like do my hair, put my makeup on, I would also have in the background like a YouTube video on a topic that I was interested in. Or because I'm a Christian, I would listen to the Bible in a language that I was learning and just have that on in the background as I was like doing my hair, getting ready for the day. So you could even combine languages with something simple like that, just getting ready for your day.
Oh yeah.
Totally. I tried to at one point listen to like a TED talk in a different language.
I did that too.
As I was getting dressed, because I was like, I'll learn something new. I'll be working on my languages while I get dressed. That's another one that I just haven't really kept up with. That one I can do. My brain can process that, but it just has been harder for me to keep up with. But something I do like is I find while I'm at school, like eating breakfast or even sometimes like lunch or like something before I go to class, I'll like want to like watch a video or something to like relax or whatever. And so I have like what I found like a few YouTube channels that I like in like each of the languages that I study. So I'll watch like a French video or something while I eat breakfast or something in my dorm room.
I've recently been watching during breakfast, I've been watching a German guy teaching you how to speak Plattdeutsch. So I'm getting bilingual breakfast.
Bilingual breakfast. I like that. And also, don't feel bad for like asking us any questions. Like, if you feel like, oh, I'm asking questions and it's your interview, because honestly, you guys know each other better than I know you guys. So, therefore, maybe you can get even more out of this interview or help other people get more out of it by asking those questions that I wouldn't have thought to ask or anything.
Thank you. Thank you.
Matt stepped out with the interviewing. He doesn't even do this in our podcast.
I don't. No, you're totally right. I just let you run the show.
Well, hey, that's great. But anyway, so if you guys, do you guys have any extra or additional comments or thoughts about the topic that you want to say before we close that we wouldn't have talked about?
It's okay to be busy. It's okay to not, like, I saw someone, we have like a Discord chat, like just a group chat that we do of like Polyglot Progress fans who just talk, and I saw someone put in like the accountability chat like, wow, I haven't done any language things all summer, and someone was just like, well, that's not a good attitude to have. He's like, what do you mean? He goes, and the other person goes, well, if you just keep thinking about I haven't done anything, you're not going to do anything. And I was like, my heart right now, I'm like, I need this kind of positivity in my life. But just like, it's okay to have not done something for a while. I've gone probably a month or so without any active language learning. I've gone longer than that without any active language learning. And I feel a lot of guilt for that because like I co-run a large like language learning platform on YouTube. So I'm like, this is part of my identity. I need to do this. But like things happen, you know, we get busy and like, it's okay to fall off your track for a while, you know? There's no point in just like what's the word, belaboring, if that's right, that guilt, you know, that won't get you anywhere positive. It's just like you can start now, you can start tomorrow, you know, there are new days and it's fine.
Yeah, and I'd say also just like know kind of where your priorities are, and priorities doesn't necessarily mean like things coming before other things. I think all the time it's more so what you want to make sure that you're doing in your life, but then also sometimes it's like what comes first and stuff. And like if language learning isn't your priority at that moment, but it's priority enough that you're doing it, almost like that's sort of where I'm at this summer. I think I had the same problem as you where I was like, but I do Polyglot Progress, so I have to like do all this language stuff over the summer. But it's like I have other interests. Like I'm trying to get like an Etsy shop started right now. So like I want to focus time on that. And it's like I also want to learn languages. So I think just like letting yourself be okay with doing like a little bit, like making yourself small tasks and feeling rewarded through those small tasks that you do is like so much better just because I feel like I've made more progress almost than I would have if I'd set myself like really intensive goals, like study for 30 minutes every single day, because I end up just kind of like doing it at the end of the day. I feel good about it. It's something I now do to kind of like relax before I go to bed, just because I've been doing it now for, I guess, almost 8 months since I started kind of at the beginning of this year. I like made a goal to study every day in 2018 and I've kept up with it. But I think part of it is like, and the same thing with just New Year's resolution in general, is like starting small and not being like you have to like go to the gym for 2 hours every day, because it's just going to be too harsh of a set in stone. Like nothing's going to change in the few days that you've made the goal. So I think letting yourself start and like growing more and more, and like for me adding on more languages, or just like getting really used to studying every single day. And so now it's at the point where like I'll lay in bed for like 30 minutes and just like do some languages, and it's really relaxing and it's like a great way to end my day. So I think you can find ways to make it work in your busy schedule where like you don't feel like it's another busy thing.
I had
go ahead.
Yeah.
No, you.
No, it just like I think there are sometimes like unknown goals that you set. Like I've been having this goal of like I want to study ancient Greek, because just like I've had this growing interest in it, like with this one poet I really like whose translations I enjoy, and so just I've had this fascination with it, and I translated my first sentences in ancient Greek today and read them out loud and like felt really accomplished with that. Like it like I get reading the alphabet was something that didn't come too much as a difficulty for me. Knowing whether my pronunciation's right is a different thing, but having translated those sentences and being like, oh, all of this makes sense, like that was just really big, and it's something I didn't even like expect as a goal, but I got a lot of pride from that, and it was really nice.
Oh, that's great. And I think Greek looks awesome, so that's awesome
Yeah.
that you're doing that.
It sounds pretty epic.
Any final thoughts from you guys? Other than what you just recapped here
I
and
don't think
mentioned?
so. I think I'm good.
Okay.
Me too.
Well, I wanted to thank you guys so much, not just for joining me and everything and kind of like sharing your wisdom on this topic with everybody, but also for being honest, because I noticed that throughout these videos in this series, it shows that even the people who kind of like find their identity in this on YouTube in language learning aren't perfect, and that we struggle, and that these topics, we all go through them and we're still trying to figure it out. Like, we haven't already figured it out and we're like, yeah, this is how I beat it. It's more like,
Absolutely.
this is how I'm currently going through it right now, and maybe this will help you. So I wanted
love
to
this
thank you
series
guys
so
for
much
that.
for that reason. It's so honest and open, and I really like. I love everything about it so much. Thank you for doing this series, because it's really important for language learners, and just like, I think there is a lot of that on YouTube of like, I have the secret that you will learn languages and never forget it, and it's like, oh, but we're normal people, you know. You know.
I think just in general too, it's the same thing of that like kind of social media thing of you only see the one thing. So I think it's really handy too, because I'm sure there's lots of people who I watch on YouTube too who are like bigger polyglots or whatever, who I look at and I'm like, man, I don't I don't do that much every day. Like, this is part of my, like, I should be prioritizing languages more, because now I make videos, so I have to be like that too. But I'm also sure they go through the same thing and are like, you know, I don't feel like doing a language today, like, it's fine. Or like, we're planning to go to the Polyglot conference, and I keep being like, what if someone speaks to me and I forget everything that I know in every language, including English, and everyone decides I'm a fraud? Like, but it's like,
you're a phony
yeah. But then I'm also like, but I don't claim to like know these languages to an insane degree. But still, it's I think is one of those things that everyone kind of has the problem with. And so I think especially for people who are just getting started, I think it's important to be able to see that like people who have been doing this for a long time are kind of like in the same place, in the sense of people who are just getting started as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so in the end, everyone's just okay. Like, we're all okay where we are.
Yeah.
8 years old isn't too old to learn a language.
8 years old. You've got plenty of time.
The number one takeaway from this video: 8 years old is not too old to learn a language.
New research proves 8 years old, there's no more language learning.
Yeah, so I really wanted to thank you guys for like being part of this and just being so honest and open about your experiences and everything. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you too. We're so happy to be here.
And then I'll see everybody in the next video of this series, or just in the next video in general. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.